Hello my friends, and welcome to this video, 17 things I wish I knew when I started paddleboarding. This video is gonna give you my first-hand experience on things that I wish I knew back then, and I want to make sure that you avoid some of the mistakes that I do. So let's get to it. So let's get into the list here. Number 1, choosing the right board can make or break your experience. So I started off with a really cheap no-name sup brand, and while it was good for paddling, like, hey, it got me on the water, it did its job. Having looked back, I wish that I got more of a reputable manufacturer. The board overall is very difficult to stand on, so you're always on edge, and it just wasn't that great of a quality board, but it got me introduced to paddleboarding. So how do you choose the right board for yourself? Well, I can't tell you specifically what board is right for you, but if you look through some of my reviews, you will get an idea. Or it doesn't even have to be my reviews, it could be other people's reviews if you want, but do the research. Take the time, take a couple hours, and really look at your options. Now, luckily, there's a lot of options for almost anywhere in the world, and so some of the brands will be different in each of the continents. But most continents will have at least one or two very well known reputable brands that will be able to get you on the water and have a good warranty with them to make sure that you have peace of mind that this thing isn't just going to explode under you when you're paddling. Number 2, and this isn't super important, but find a manufacturer that has a US Fin Box setup. The US Fin Box will just allow you to interchange all kinds of different fins. You can do surfboard fins, paddleboard fins, and they're just a lot more secure and they're a lot more reliable compared to proprietary or those stupid slide-in fin boxes. Number 3, just spend the money and get an electric pump. I'm serious, guys. This is gonna save you so much manual effort, and if you go paddleboarding at least once a week, it is going to be so worth it. There's just so many advantages of having an electric pump. You just allow the thing to do it for you. You can set up your board, you can put things away while it's doing it for you, and you also have the energy to go back out on a paddle. There's nothing worse than just spending all that time and effort, pump, and then you're tired and you want to go out for the full day, but you're all sore. It's just, I'm not a big fan of manual pumps at all. Get the electric pump. Number 4, check the tide tables and weather before going out. So tide tables are applicable if you're at the ocean. So this river right here, this is actually an ocean river. It's the Nickel River. And when you go at the wrong time, whenever you're going in between the low and high tide, you're gonna be paddling a heck of a lot more. And if you're new to paddleboarding, you might just get drifted off by the tide. And I've seen this happen so many times at Crescent Beach, etc. Lake's not as bad, but look at the wind especially. Look at what the weather is doing. Definitely don't go during thunderstorms or very windy days. Like, ideally, gusts from like 7 kilometers to about maybe 15 is good. Anything from 20, 30, especially when you're on an inflatable paddleboard, no good, because you're just going to be pushed like a sail. Also check the water temperature. Like right now, it's March in Canada. If I fell in that water, it'd be a bit unpleasant, and hypothermia might potentially be on the table here. So it's always important just to look at the water temperature as well. Make sure that you're wearing the right equipment. So like in this, for example, I'd at the very least have a wetsuit on for sure. Even though it's a nice sunny day, definitely wetsuit. Or if there's snow on the ground or it's really chilly, then you gotta spend the extra money and get a dry suit. When it's summertime, you don't have to worry about it as much because it's hotter out. The water temperature is not as cold, but still just make sure that you dress for the elements. Number 5, wearing a PDF and a leash is very important, especially the leash, because if you're in tidal areas, you fall off the board starts to drift off, well, you're down Schitt's Creek without a paddle, or in this case, without a paddleboard. It's also recommended by law that you have a PFD on board. I don't want people out there to be unsafe, getting fines, etc. So just bring the PDF with you. It doesn't have to be a big thing. There are also belt PFDs, tiny little vest PFDs. And if you're unsure, just send me a comment and I'll give you some recommendations. Number 6, I highly recommend that you bring a lot of liquids with you when paddleboarding, especially in the sun. There's something about paddleboarding and just baking in the sun where it just drains you physically and mentally sometimes. I usually like to bring at least 2 full bottles of water with me if I'm doing like a 3-hour paddle. Anything more, get like a giant jug or just get something. But highly recommend that you stay hydrated. It's so important. Number 7, dress for the elements. We already kind of mentioned this a bit in the weather section, but wear your PFD, wear your life vest, wear a wetsuit, just wear what is appropriate with the conditions. We have lots of articles on that on our website, or you can find that on Google. Just make sure that you dress appropriately. An important tip, especially for new paddlers, go against the wind / tide first and come back with it. You want to be expending your peak energy in the beginning, going against the force, because if you go with it and you're trying to come back, you might get out of energy, you might be gassed. And I learned that the hard way in Deep Cove, and the person I was with, they almost didn't make it when we were kayaking. So not just for paddleboarding, but kayaking, any paddle sports, go against the wind and come back with it towards the end. It'll just make things so much easier. If you get tired, you can just let the tide, wind, whatever, just bring you back. But if you are going with it and then deciding, oh, time to go back, you're gonna be gassed, man. Tip number 9, paddling on an inflatable feels a lot different than a hardboard. I remember the first time that I went paddleboarding, I rented, and it took me, 10-15 minutes to kind of stand up, despite me having honestly terrible balance. But it took me 10-15 minutes to stand up, and it was all fine and dandy. So I decided, hey, you know what, this is a cool activity, I'm gonna buy an inflatable board. So I bought the cheapest inflatable board, and standing felt almost nearly impossible. Now, a lot of it was because of the board, and I didn't do my proper research, hence tip number 1. But give yourself that time to learn and give yourself permission to bail in the water, because that is the way you're gonna learn. And speaking of paddling on slightly unstable boards, that brings us to number 10. It's okay to paddle on your knees. There's no paddleboard police that are gonna come around being like, hey, you're supposed to stand up paddleboard, blah, blah, blah. No. You can paddle on your knees, paddle how you feel comfortable, and you just do you. Everyone's learning process is different, so don't rush yourself and don't worry about what other people think. Just go at your pace. Tip number 11, when you do get to that point where you want to stand on the board and you feel comfortable on it, when you do it, go from your knees and do sort of a squat position. I'll do a whole video overview about what exactly that looks like, or you can even look at some of my review videos to see what that looks like. But look at the horizon. Do not look down on your board, because when you look down, that is where you're going. But if you look at the horizon, your body will be able to just realize, okay, we're going straight, instead of, oh, we're going down, oh, panic, panic, panic. Just look at the horizon, paddle forward as soon as you can. It's kind of similar like riding a bike. Just get that momentum. Number 12, stay loose. Now, what the hell does that mean? What that means is you don't want to tense up your body like a stick. You want to remain less tense. And this comes with experience. The first couple of times, the general advice, stay loose, it's gonna be hard, if not impossible. But as you get more comfortable on your board, ease your muscles, relax, maybe think of a little meditation in your mind. Just observe your environment and be one with it. And that will help your muscles relax a lot more, which allows you to paddle better. Tip number 13, use your whole body in your paddle stroke. So a lot of things I see beginners do is they just use their arms. And when you're just using your arm in that paddling motion, you're not going to be as effective in your stroke at all. Instead, you want to use your whole body. And this is why paddleboarding is actually a great all-body exercise. You want to go forward, just like a rowing almost. You're using your entire body instead of just doing this. Tip number 14, when you're paddling, you want your paddle blade to be as close to the board as possible. The further away you paddle from your board, the more it will turn, which means that you have to do more correcting strokes. So the closer the paddle is to the board when you enter the water, the less corrective strokes you have to do and the better the tracking of the board will be. Because a lot of times tracking comes down to the paddler and their paddle technique. Tip number 15, and you probably don't want to hear this as a beginner, but falling is an important tool. Now, the more you fall, the more you learn your limits on the board. So give yourself permission to look like an idiot and fall off the board. Just do it. Who cares what people think? This will help you learn so much better as opposed to you not testing your limits. Make sure you fall in a safe place though. Don't be falling in shallow waters where there's like razor clams and hazards like this. Be smart where you try new techniques. And this will also greatly increase your skills on the board, including be able to do sweep strokes and pivot turns, all kinds of things. On the topic of falling, tip number 16, fall away from your board. So, especially if you have a hardboard. If you're on your board and you feel a bit unbalanced, make sure that you almost have a little jump off of it into the water, as opposed to you just trying to land on the board. This increases the likelihood that you get injured. So when you fall or you feel unstable and you're at that point of no return, just fall away from it. And finally, our last tip at number 17, for now anyway, learn to brace for the waves. You are going to encounter waves, so it's important to learn how to brace for them. Everyone's technique is perhaps a little bit different, but just make sure that you practice it and you're at a safe spot to practice it. You want to make sure that you are a bit more in a squat position so that you can absorb those waves in your joints as opposed to you standing like a stick and just ultimately falling off. It's a skill that you gotta learn, and sometimes you will fall off, like I said, which is fine, but it is important. And especially when boulders come around and all that, just learn to brace the waves. You'll be good. Thanks for watching this content. If you liked it, subscribe, like, etc. We hope to see you out on the water, and we'll be providing a lot more content for you. See ya.